Back in March of 2020, I was in a parking lot with my two small children, and somebody yelled out an open window at us. Coronavirus. It was such a small moment, and my children barely perceived it, but I knew what was happening. It was a reminder that it doesn't matter that I'm an American citizen, that I have lived here my entire life. I'm still a target because of what I look like. It's a feeling that so many people of Asian descent in this country have felt over the past year, but it goes beyond that. I spoke to Asian Americans from across the country about the increase in racism against Asians, their collective pain, and where we go from here.
How can humans treat other humans like this? And
8 people are dead, 6 of them Asian women. And while there were headlines and news reports and social media,
but he does claim that it was not racially motivated.
How the story was told is an example of how it can feel to be Asian in America. Jamie Moy says it's a feeling of being unseen and unheard.
They cared more about what he said and what he said he did it, why he did it, instead of who died and who lost their lives and who lost their mother or wife.
Jamie grew up in New York City's Chinatown. Her family owns a well-known bar in the neighborhood. After a year of being personally targeted and seeing Asian elders beaten or killed across the country, she says her feelings are overwhelming.
I feel sad that humanity is like this. I feel angry that they're attacking our people, and our elders. Angry that I can't do anything about it. Scared that it can happen to anyone. It could happen to me.
Across the country, Asian Americans are experiencing similar emotions, particularly, as you can imagine, those in Atlanta.
I never felt this level of vulnerability living in America since the March 16th shooting incident. It took me a long time to process why I felt that way. And I think it's because it happened a couple miles from where I live. And I thought it was a diverse city that I really enjoyed. And all of a sudden, I no longer felt safe.
Seung-hee Lee moved to the U.S. from Korea in 2008 to work in public health. In March of last year, she traveled to JFK Airport to volunteer with their COVID-19 response.
I was waiting for coffee, and this random guy came up to me and started coughing on me and saying racial slurs and saying, "Oh, virus, virus," and like waving his hand away from him. And I never felt such humiliation in public like that, and I just didn't know what to do and what to say, how to react, and a little sense of embarrassment, and I just grabbed my coffee and left.
She tried not to think about it until the recent shooting brought it right back.
I remembered all that feeling all over again, and remembered those who were in line. No one said anything, no one stepped in, no one looked at me. Everybody just looked away as if it didn't happen. And that deafening silence just came back to me all over again.
Stanford professor and author of Asian American, Historical Crossings of a Racial Frontier, David Palumbo Liu, says the feeling of anti-Asian racism going unseen is common.
It seemed to be something of less consequence and less frequency. And the interesting thing about anti-Asian racism and violence is that we can go along for huge stretches of time and it would have seen that we've made it into the mainstream, we're the model minority, we're successful, we get into colleges, and then something will happen like this that will cause this sort of undercurrent of anti-Asian racism to explode.
Jolene Kuo Hastings lives in Kansas City and says the blatant racism she has experienced in the Midwest took her by surprise.
So I was at the grocery store and a white man came up to me and said, "Oh, you're one of those." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "You're one of those double maskers. You've got 2 of them on." And I said, "I do, because that's what is recommended right now, and I'm just following what is being advised." And he's like, "Well, those don't work." And then he said, "We're in this situation because of people like you. But he had said that kind of under his breath as he was turning away. And, you know, what I felt was that I felt hurt. I felt very offended. I felt very angry because I just feel like ignorance is so rampant. Hey, Michelle, I am getting ready to go out for a walk.
She no longer feels safe leaving her home.
I do feel nervous to go out and like just run an errand or, you know, go pick up carry out or something like that.
It's no different for Nancy Schuster, who was adopted by an American family and moved from Korea as a baby. She was recently targeted on the New York City subway by teenagers yelling racial slurs.
Just a couple weeks ago, I was taking the subway and 4 kids were harassing me and it was the strangest thing, because I'm like, I'm a grown-ass adult, and I'm like, these kids are making me a little nervous, because I didn't know what they were going to do.
Nancy grew up in a rural, predominantly white town and says she encountered racism at a very early age.
I built my thick skin just from all of that, being made fun of constantly, incessantly, kids pulling their eyes tighter to make them more slanted like mine, but I didn't understand that my eyes were slanted.
She says when she heard about the Atlanta shootings, it brought her back to her early childhood.
I literally cried. I literally, like, all day I cried, because it was just like, it's like PTSD, because it could be you. You don't know. Do you know what I mean? You don't know if someone just gets angry and just, like, whips out a gun, or, like, some kids just want to beat you up in the subway or something.
It's nearly 4,000.
Amidst the fear and the grief, Jamie sees a need for action.
This is not going anywhere. It just keeps happening. Every day there's every day there's another incident every day. And, you know, we might get a spot on TV for a hot second and no one cares afterwards. We need to, you know, come together as a community and, you know, speak up.
Asian Americans across the country are attempting to do just that. Paul Song is a doctor and biotech executive by trade, but has also become an Asian American community leader. He and his wife, CNN journalist Lisa Ling, and even their young daughters have received threats since the pandemic lockdowns first started.
Lisa was doing some reports. People were attacking her for being Chinese and being part of the problem. So we would get very threatening messages behind the scenes on social media, basically harassing her about the China flu, the Kung flu.
He and Lisa have spent much of their time bringing awareness to the escalating racism and also trying to unite the community.
It's really a sad time, but it's also a time for us to rise up together and to be taken seriously. And also, it's really wonderful when you go to these rallies, you do see people that are of Japanese descent, Korean descent, Chinese descent, who maybe would not have really stood up for one another, who are doing that right now.
He has hope that this dark time will bring a new solidarity.
A lot of these people that I see at these rallies are also the people that were front and center at the Black Lives Matter rallies as well. So we believe this is a social justice issue. It's an issue of equality that's not just for the Asian community, but also beyond.
What was so interesting to me when I started working on this story was I posted on social media looking for people to share their experiences. But more than hearing from people who wanted to share their stories, I got so many messages from Asian Americans thanking me for just doing the story. It was odd because in my career as a journalist, I've very rarely been thanked for a story if that person isn't in the story. And that's when I realized they are in the story. It may not be their faces and their voices, but this is all their stories. These are all our stories. And we've never heard them told in a way where we've felt heard. So I know that there's so much more to tell, but I do hope that I've helped to amplify their voices. And I hope that we can move on from this place of pain to a place of healing, education, and growth.